morning, and welcome to the Grim. I'm your host, Kristen. On today's episode, we'll be opening the gate and entering Benton Avenue Cemetery, located in Helena, Montana. So grab your favorite mug, cozy up, and let's take a dig into history. In the recent years, we've seen the revival of the cowboy in American culture. While they've never truly disappeared, the rise of urban trends pushed the ways of the West out of focus for many. However, Montana has seen a resurgence, thanks in part to the national sensation Yellowstone. The drama reignited interest in the state, its cowboys, and its rich history. Its spin off 1883 further showcased the American frontier, depicting settlers' journeys and the brutal challenges they faced. Coming off of last week's episode on the Grim, I know some might feel a little weary of America's Wild West narratives, but with Yellowstone concluding, it seemed fitting to feature a cemetery from Montana, one with its own rich and haunting history. Although it's located on the outskirts of a city rather than on a ranch, its story is long, fascinating, and reputedly just as haunted, making it a perfect fit for the Grim this week. The cemetery is located on the west side of present day Benton Avenue, now within the city limits of Helena. However, when it was established in 1870, it lay outside the original town site. Directly southeast of the cemetery, across the street, is Carroll College, a Catholic liberal arts institution that began as a boys' high school in 1910. To the north, a large open area is intersected by train tracks running perpendicular to Benton Avenue and parallel to the northern edges of both the college campus and the cemetery grounds. Beyond the tracks, residential neighborhoods stretch farther north, with several homes and yards bordering the cemetery's immediate southern and western edges, integrating the historic site into its modern day surroundings. The history of Benton Avenue Cemetery is deeply tied to the contributions of women and Helena's early development. Back in 1870, Montana at the time was still a territory, when the cemetery began thanks to two sisters, Rachel and Elizabeth Brooke, who sold the land to the Lewis and Clark County Commissioners for use as a burial ground. They in turn set aside 10 acres just outside Helena to accommodate the area's growing population. This growth stemmed from the 1864 discovery of gold in the Last Chance Gulch, which brought a diverse influx of newcomers into the region. The cemetery takes its name from the historic Benton Avenue, which borders its grounds. The land is divided into four quadrant like sections. Family plots occupy much of the southern half, often outlined with stone or wrought iron fences. In 1872, the Masons purchased most of the northeastern section, so many of the burials there had Masonic affiliation. The northwest corner of the cemetery tells a darker story of unmarked graves and reinterred remains. This area stands out from the rest of the cemetery, lacking upright headstones. These graves are infrequently marked, suggesting that many of the original tombstones were either made of non durable materials or burials were intentionally left unmarked. Toward the western edge, the evidence of graves become less defined, hinting at a pauper's field for the indigent or an area where unmarked graves of unknown individuals were transferred during the early historic period. This section likely served as a final resting place for individuals of lesser means, as the gravestones are smaller and closely grouped together, rather than being arranged by family plots. From 1875 to 1890, it served as Helena's primary Protestant cemetery. However, with Montana achieving statehood in 1889 and the opening of a more refined Forestville Cemetery, Benton Avenue gradually fell out of use. The cemetery's history, though, stretches even further back than its establishment, as some of its burials predate its founding. These early graves, dating to the 1860s, were reinterred here from an earlier cemetery, a detail we'll revisit shortly. What makes Benton Avenue particularly fascinating is how it grew alongside Helena and the state of Montana, offering a snapshot of the region's transformation from a rugged frontier to a more settled and structured community. Today remains a final resting place for many of Helena's earliest residents, particularly women, whose stories reflect resilience, sacrifice, and survival in Montana's pioneering days. Before entering, visitors are greeted by a large wooden sign honoring vigilantes, legislators, builders, gamblers, and those who met their end at the hangman's tree nearby. It's a stark reminder of Montana's rough and tumble past, a land shaped by tough people taking their chances on the frontier from all walks of life. I personally appreciate how history, if properly retold, doesn't sugarcoat the imperfections of those who came before us. Most of history is written by the victors, leaving out the darker details of how success was achieved. The residents of Benton Avenue Cemetery are no exception. Some had honorable lives, while others carried far grimmer stories, both worth uncovering. Before Benton Avenue Cemetery was established, Helena's original burial site was a mining cemetery on Warner Street. However, when the land was deemed a prime location for Central Elementary School, the burials were reinterred to Benton Avenue. In 1890, during a sewer pipe construction in Helena, workers unexpectedly unearthed a wooden coffin. Their curiosity got the better of them, and after struggling to pry it open, one worker swung a pickaxe at the box, splitting it open. Out spilled a decaying skeleton, accompanied by a foul, nauseating stench. Rather than alerting the authorities, the workers thrust the bones back into the coffin and left it where they found it. A news report at the time explained the logic behind the actions, stating, "The contractor for the work is building sewers, not hunting skeletons. So unless the city wants to have the box placed in a regular cemetery, it will be allowed to remain where it is." As construction continued, more coffins were unearthed by digging and flooding incidents at the school, but had luckier circumstances for those found. The city took many and reinterred them properly within Benton Avenue. Still, the unsettling reality remains. It's likely that forgotten burials still lie beneath the grounds near the school, undisturbed and long forgotten. Benton Avenue Cemetery also holds moments of reverence and celebration. In 1883, Helena hosted its first Memorial Day parade, which fittingly concluded with a ceremony at Benton Avenue to honor those who helped establish Montana. Of the 1,473 graves on the 10 acres, 737 belong to individuals who died before statehood. These graves are marked with an MT, signifying their origin in the Montana Territory, a unique detail not often seen in cemeteries elsewhere in the United States. Against the backdrop of Mount Helena, the cemetery offers a striking view of Montana's vast roaming fields. The grounds are dotted with headstones made of various materials, but two graves stand out. Located side by side, they're surrounded by intricate cast iron bassinets, a rare and touching tribute to two young children lost but forever remembered. While fencing or cast iron headstones are common, the bassinet's design is unique to Benton Avenue, blending artistry with somber remembrance. Among its residents, 52 veterans rest within the cemetery. Many are easily identified by their government issued tombstones, while others blend in with private headstones placed by family members. Notably, two of these veterans, James Milligan and John C. Gilman, served in the War of 1812. For many years, the grave of Civil War veteran Albert E. Haskell remained unmarked, but thanks to generous donations, he now has a proper grave marker. Albert E. Haskell, often called Abe, was born in 1842 to Edward and Sarah Haskell in Toroga, New York. He began his early years as a farmer before enlisting in Company D of the 106th New York Infantry Regiment on June 2, 1862, where he quickly rose to the rank of corporal. Haskell's service was marked by both bravery and hardship. On July 9th, in 1864, during the Battle of Mockasee in Maryland, he was severely wounded and captured by Confederate forces. Held prisoner in Danville, Virginia, he remained there until being exchanged on March 25th, 1865. During the war, he reportedly endured 6 gunshot wounds and was run over by a gun carriage, yet persevered. His resilience earned him a promotion to first sergeant on May 25th, 1865, before mustering out on June 22nd, 1865. It's unclear whether Albert arrived in Montana with his parents or if they traveled separately. By 1870, all three, Albert, Edward, and Sarah, were living in Silver Gulch, Montana, with Albert and Edward working as Gulch miners. The Haskells' financial status oddly reflected a stark contrast of Albert versus his parents. Edward and Sarah reportedly had a modest personal estate of $300, while Albert's estate was valued at an impressive $7,000, making him the wealthiest man in the Gulch. Whether his fortune came from a military pension, successful mining, or a combination of both remains a mystery. Sarah Haskell passed away on January 11th, 1872, at the age of 58. Edward then purchased a family plot in Benton Cemetery where Sarah was laid to rest. Today, her tombstone remains illegible, weathered by time but still marking her final resting place. By 1880, census records show Albert and Edward living together in Belmont, Montana. Their household included a female housekeeper, a young Chinese laborer, both close to Albert's age. All three men were listed as laborers. By this time, Edward was noted as maimed, crippled, disabled, or bedridden, and likely passed away shortly after. Like Sarah's, Edward's tombstone in the family plot at Benton Cemetery has become unreadable over the years. On December 9th, 1898, Albert tragically passed away at the age of 56 after being accidentally shot in a hunting accident. He had no headstone, but a cement base was later placed by members of the E Campus Vitatis hundreds of years later, prepared to hold a suitable marker. Volunteers working together decided Abe needed a headstone. The stone, costing a total of 1,750, was provided when 500 was generously donated by Darren Rummel of Montana Granite. Then the remaining 1,250 was raised through contributions raised by the Eclampus Vitatis. Unfortunately, military tombstones for veterans can only be provided by the government if requested by a direct descendant, which is why he wasn't requested one. Now Haskell's gravestones shines brightly in the cemetery where his memory lives on for hundreds of years to come, thanks to those volunteers. If you're searching for a Yellowstone style drama complete with cowboys, a sprawling ranch, and a family that loses it all, look no further than the story of W.C. Child and his historic ranch. The W.C. Child Ranch, also known as Kleffner Ranch or the Child Kleffner Ranch, is a nationally recognized historic site located just south of East Helena, Montana, along State Highway 518. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places on November 23, 1977, and its history is filled with ambition, tragedy, and resilience. W.C. Child purchased the property around 1885, originally naming it Whiteface Farm. Child was a pioneer in Montana Territory, becoming one of the first ranchers to raise purebred heifer cattle. After enduring the devastating winter of 1886 to 87, which wreaked havoc on ranchers across the region, Child responded by constructing an impressive 27,000 square foot barn, standing 50 feet tall and built a sturdy fieldstone foundation. The barn could shelter 500 head of cattle and hold up to 350 tons of hay, a monumental feat for its time. In 1888, Child also built a distinctive octagon house on the property. The second floor of the home featured an open ballroom, which became a venue for lavish meetings and parties. Interestingly, Child himself lived in Helena and primarily used the ranch for entertaining rather than a full time residence. However, the property was short lived. The silver pandemic of 1893 sent Child into bankruptcy and then led to his passing later in October. According to his obituary, he worried himself to death. His financial ruin led the ranch to changing multiple hands over the next 5 decades. By the mid 20th century, the property had fallen into disrepair. Enter Paul Cluffer, who leased the ranch in 1943 and purchased it outright in 1946. Kleffner and his family worked tirelessly to restore and maintain the property, keeping its history alive. The ranch remained in their care until 2005, when it was sold to Dennis and Stacy Young. Today, the W.C. Child Ranch has found a new life as a premier event venue, hosting weddings, parties, and other gatherings amidst its historic charm. From its cattle raising roots to its opulent ballroom and dramatic rise and fall story, the ranch remains a symbol of Montana's rugged history and enduring legacy. Among the countless stories of the American West, there are always fearless women, some well documented, others forgotten by history, but each leaving an indelible mark on the past. One of the most notable women interred in this cemetery is Callista Ingersoll. Just north of the main gate stands a monument marking her final resting place. Callista was the wife of Dr. Silas Stone Ingersoll, Helena's first homeopathic doctor, and she arrived in Helena during the early wave of settlers. Although few records remain to tell her story, one pioneer remembered her as a dedicated midwife, describing how she bathed the feather brows of her patients in soothing waters of Last Chance Stream. Her work as a caregiver would have been vital in those rugged early days. When Callista passed away in 1875, her death received no mention in the newspapers, a common fate for women of her time. Yet her quiet contributions endured, leaving behind a legacy of care and courage in the heart of a growing frontier. One of the infants Callista may have delivered was Tallulah Allen, born on April 5th, in 1865. Tallulah holds the distinction of being the first white female born in Helena. Tragically, she died at the age of 15 in 1880, her life cut short like so many others during that era. Another heartbreaking story is that of Gussie Bach, who died in childbirth in 1889 while delivering her third child. Her grave holds both her and her newborn she lost during childbirth, with a heartbreaking tribute etched into her tombstone. Thus, clinging to that slight spar within her arms, the mother drifted out upon the dark and unknown sea. The cemetery is also home to stories of selflessness and sacrifice. Northwest of the Connor Mausoleum stands a tall monument of Mary Dunfrey, who died on December 24th, 1885, during a devastating diphtheria outbreak. While caring for the sick Kuan children, Mary contracted the disease herself, an unusual occurrence, as diphtheria rarely affected adults. Despite her efforts, the children also succumbed to the illness, and Mary was laid to rest alongside them. Not far from these graves lies Mary Agnes Merrill, a woman whose life reflects the era's complexities. A business associate of the prominent Madame Lily McGraw, Mary Agnes was buried within a wrought iron enclosure, its decorative gate bearing her name. Known as Belle Flynn at the time of her death, probate records reveal her prosperity: real estate, elegant furniture, and a lavish wardrobe that included a mink coat, velvet garments, and silver accessories. These remnants of wealth hint at her life as a lady of the evening. In the cemetery's northwest corner, the landscape shifts to anonymity, where rows of unmarked graves hold the remains of women and infants. Some of these may be tied to the early Florence Crichton home, a refuge for young mothers and their children during times of hardship. These resting places, silent and unadorned, remind visitors of lives often overlooked, yet deeply connected to Helena's history. Grave markers at Benton Avenue Cemetery are made of various materials, including stone, wood, and cast metal, although stone is the most common. These markers differ greatly in size, type, condition, shape, and age. Obelisks and tapering shafts inspired by ancient symbols of eternal life are particularly prominent and reflect the cemetery's 1870s to 1880s period. Early markers are primarily made of light colored imported marble, which later give way to local granite starting in the 1880s. Local monument makers like A.K. Prescott, Montana Marble Works, and the Kane Brothers Company contributed to the shift in these materials. Simple carved blocks and flush to the ground markers were also prevalent. In the Masonic section, traditional symbols of the organization appear frequently as obelisk and carvings. Other distinctive decorations include tree trunks, floral, and fontanel motifs, and unique memorials for children. One notable example is a carved chair with a hat placed upon it and tiny shoes tucked underneath, a touching tribute to children who died in 1885. Three similar imported tombstones mark the graves of children who passed away that same year, likely ordered together from a catalog. One such marker honors the Kuhn children, a brother and sister who died of diphtheria in December of 1885. The uniformity of such gravestones, along with the intricate carvings like those on the Kuhn Children's Monument, suggests these customized markers were not always readily available. with temporary markers often replaced by more substantial ones later on. Some gravestones, including military markers, were imported. In 1891, crates of marble headstones and footstones were shipped from Washington, D.C., to replace deteriorating wooden markers at the graves of Union soldiers buried in the Helena Cemetery, spanning both Benton Avenue and Forestvale. A few wooden markers still remain in the cemetery, rare survivors of what was once the most common form of monument. As family fortunes improved, these temporary wooden markers were often replaced with more durable stone memorials. Several metal markers that still holding up well against the elements can be found throughout the cemetery, particularly in the Masonic section. A small group of these markers also appears in a plot in the southeast quadrant. Unlike the standardized small markers in the Masonic section, these are larger and more intricate in design. Some metal plaques on stakes are placed in various plots, identifying individuals as members of the military or social organizations. In the Masonic section, Joseph and Letty Horsky erected a distinctive metal and stone monument in memorial of their 15-month-old daughter, Josie, who died in April of 1886. The monument features a lantern-like metal structure, originally enclosed with glass sides, where the family could place small offerings of food or trinkets. At the center of the southeast quadrant stands a one-story granite mausoleum, the only structure of its kind in the cemetery. Likely built by the Kane Granite Company, which operated the 10-Mile Quarry in the early 1900s, this mausoleum is a striking example of craftsmanship. The building faces south and is constructed from large granite ashlar blocks, with granite slabs notched to direct water and serving as the roof. The bottom row of stones at the ground level extends slightly outward, creating both a watercourse and a focal point for the structure. The mausoleum has a rectangular plan with gable ends at its narrow sides, and it's devoid of openings on the third and fourth of its sides. The south facade features an entrance flanked by engaged columns set up by the foundation. These columns are flat faced in a simple classical design, supporting the large radiating vassals that display the family's name, Connor and Dingle. The entry gates set back within the arched opening consist of an iron grate and a massive inner doors. Above the entrance, the granite roof cap is inscribed with the date 1908. The overall design blends of classical and Celtic influences, of subtle echoes of early Irish or Anglo-Saxon chapels. Yet not much else is known of the Connor and Dingles, at least according to my researching limits. The Benton Avenue Cemetery remains astonishingly active to this day, with the most recent interment being of James Kinnerman, who was laid to rest in 1994. It's no surprise that cemeteries like Benton Avenue would be home to its share of unsettling ghost stories. One tale that has haunted the grounds for years involves Mary Dunfrey, who we mentioned earlier dying during the diphtheria epidemic of 1885. Today, visitors claim to see the eerie specters of a woman and two small children drifting silently through the cemetery. Could it be the restless spirits of Mary Dunfrey and the children still bound to the place of their untimely deaths? One chilling photograph taken at Dumfries' grave at night reveals a strange mist hovering over the site. Some say it's ectoplasm, others call it a ghost mist, but some dismiss it as nothing more than dust on the lens. Whatever it is, it only adds to the unsettling atmosphere of the cemetery. Another spine chilling account centers on the grave of Fern Mary Wilson, a 15-year-old girl who died in 1911. School groups often visit Benton Avenue as part of their lessons on Helena's history, and at least on two occasions, groups of fourth graders have reported seeing a teenage girl in a yellow dress standing motionless, staring into the distance before vanishing without a trace. Could this be the ghost of Fern Marie herself, forever watching over her final resting place? The mystery remains unsolved, leaving a lingering sense of unease in the air. The ending of Yellowstone might make for good TV drama, but Montana's true stories run much deeper. Organizations like the Benton Avenue Cemetery Association work tirelessly to keep its history alive, restoring, teaching, and preserving the cemetery grounds. While Benton Avenue Cemetery might not draw the crowds or tourist attention of Montana's sprawling ranches, it holds something equally compelling: the voices of its residents, their histories, and the tales they left behind. And for those who believe that some of those souls might still linger, it's a place that certainly deserves a spot on any visitor's list. The grave grind for Benton Avenue Cemetery is a maple latte from Montage Coffee in Helena. For more honorary grinds in the area, please visit the-grim.com. For now, we're closing the gate on Benton Avenue Cemetery. We hope you enjoyed our dig into history. If you did, subscribe today to join us next time when we open the gate on the Grim.